Kierra Coles of Chicago, Illinois, was achieving a lot in 2018. The 26-year-old letter carrier bought a car, moved into a new apartment, and was expecting her first child. Becoming a mother seemed like a natural step for Kierra, who was fiercely protective of her nieces and nephews. In addition to her job with the Postal Service, the highly motivated Kierra also drove her Lyft to make extra money to finance her goals. On Monday, October 1st, Kierra had a doctor's appointment and heard her baby's heartbeat for the first time. Kierra's mother, Karen Phillips, spoke to her daughter on the phone every day. When she spoke to Kierra that day, Kierra was crying tears of joy over hearing the baby's heartbeat. On October 3rd, however, despite Karen's numerous calls, Kierra never picked up the phone, which was highly unusual. On October 4th, Karen's calls started going straight to voicemail. Kierra's frequent social media postings had also suddenly stopped. At that point, Karen went to Kierra's home and saw that her car was parked on the street. She then called police to come do a welfare check. Kierra's purse and phone were found left in her car, but her keys and wallet were missing. The decreasing temperatures in Chicago at the time also added another source of concern for Kierra's health. Kierra had severe asthma, made worse by cold temperatures, and her inhaler had been left behind. Kierra's disappearance was investigated by both the Chicago Police Department and the United States Postal Inspection Service, as Kierra worked for the Postal Service. The Postal Inspection Service offered a $25,000 reward for information, and pledges from the community quickly raised the total amount of the reward to over $28,000. In the weeks after Kierra went missing, her father, Joseph Coles, had his own round-the-clock investigation. He parked his car outside of Kierra's home and lived out of it, not wanting to miss any potential sign of her, and making himself available for people to bring him leads to follow in the case. The first major clue in the investigation came in the form of surveillance footage from a camera one of Kierra's neighbors had outside their home. The footage shows Kierra, dressed in her Postal Service uniform, apparently walking from her car to her apartment, but then turning around instead of going up to the door. She then walks past her car, crosses the street, and walks out of frame. The video was released shortly after Kierra's disappearance, and has been a source of a lot of confusion and disagreement. The Postal Inspection Service did not immediately share the Chicago Police Department's belief that it was actually Kierra in the video, because several other postal workers also lived in the same neighborhood. There was also some initial confusion on when exactly the footage was taken, and when some of the last known communications from Kierra occurred. At Kierra's job, workers were not allowed to call out of work the day of their shift. Rather, they had to call out the night before. Kierra called out of work on the night of October 2nd, but for her shift on October 3rd. According to the timestamp seen in some of the footage, Kierra is seen in it just before noon on Wednesday, which was October 3rd. When Kierra's family found her cell phone in her car, they began trying to gain access to it so that they could see if Kierra had actually been the person who called out for her shift, but it is unclear if they were successful, or if authorities were able to verify it through phone records. By the end of October, with still no sign of Kierra, the Chicago Police Department announced that they suspected she had met with foul play. Area postal workers and the greater Chicago community continue to hold rallies to keep Kierra's story in the news and organize searches for her. Kierra's family remains dedicated to finding her, despite the frustrating lack of answers so far in her case. Raymond Ko was a 62-year-old pastor in Petaling Jaya, Malaysia. He was the founder of Harapan Community, a nonprofit organization that reached out to the poor, to single mothers, and to those affected by HIV. The organization also ran a reading center that tutored students and gave English lessons to adults. On February 13, 2017, Pastor Ko left his home to go see a friend before attending a full day of meetings. That day, Pastor Ko's wife Susanna did not keep her cell phone with her. Later in the day, when she finally looked at it, she had multiple missed calls from people asking where her husband was. He had missed several important meetings, which was highly out of character for the dedicated and punctual pastor. After consulting with a friend who was a lawyer, Mrs. Coe filed a missing persons report with police that night. She was questioned for more than 5 hours, an experience which she has described as traumatic. The missing persons report was quickly tied in with other reports that had been filed that day. 2 eyewitnesses reported seeing an abduction take place just 100 meters away from a police station. At the scene, authorities found broken glass and the license plate from Pastor Coe's car. Video surveillance footage showed that Pastor Coe was the victim of a large, highly coordinated abduction. At least 3 black SUVs, 2 light-colored cars, and 2 motorbikes formed the caravan that carried out the abduction. The 3 SUVs surrounded Pastor Coe's car and forced him to stop. Someone gets out of one of the white cars, apparently videotaping the attack. The pastor's car is largely obscured by a tree in the footage, but there appears to be a struggle, and the pastor may have rammed his car into one of the SUVs in an attempt to flee. A hatchback vehicle happens upon the scene and is ordered to reverse back down the road, away from the other vehicles. It is chased down the road by one of the people on a motorbike. All of the vehicles, including Pastor Coe's, are then driven away. The entire incident took approximately 40 seconds. Pastor Coe has not been seen since, and his car has never been located. The individuals responsible for the abduction must have been surveilling Coe and followed him from his home, as he would not have normally been on the road he was abducted on. On the morning of February 13th, Pastor Coe diverted from his normal routine to drive to a friend's house to surprise him. The pastor wanted to give his friend some belacan, a Malaysian shrimp paste, to take with him to Indonesia. If his abductors had simply decided to lie in wait along the pastor's normal route, they would not have been able to abduct him that day, because he did not take it. Pastor Coe's family offered a reward in the case. The reward was originally a modest one, but they were eventually able to gather enough funds to increase the amount tenfold, bringing it to the equivalent of over $20,000 in U.S. currency. 2 weeks after the abduction, Pastor Coe's son Jonathan filed a second police report. This report was made on the suspicion that, in light of the lack of a ransom demand and the length of time Pastor Coe had been missing, he must have been murdered. At the end of March, Harapan Community had to close its reading center. Pastor Coe was considered to be the spiritual center of the facility, but he was also the main solicitor of donations for it. Without his advocacy, the center had quickly run out of funding. The main motive suspected in Pastor Coe's abduction is religion. As a Christian, Pastor Coe was in a religious minority in Malaysia. Malaysia is a multi-ethnic country where numerous religions are practiced, but 60% of its population practices Islam, which is recognized as the state's official religion. While different religions are allowed to be practiced in Malaysia, attempting to convert Muslims to these religions is illegal in most Malaysian states. In 2011, Pastor Coe alleged in a press release that on August 3rd of that year, the Selangor Islamic Religious Department raided a fundraiser his nonprofit hosted in a church on suspicions that the event was trying to convert Muslims to Christianity. The department denied these claims in November 2017 during the inquest into Pastor Coe's abduction. Pastor Coe received a death threat through the mail after the raid, and Harapan Community had to move their offices. Pastor Coe was not the only social activist to go missing around this time in Malaysia. 3 of his friends, who were also active in social causes, had also gone missing. Pastor Joshua Hilmi and his wife Ruth, as well as activist Amri Chemat, who founded the charity Peerless Hope, all went missing in November 2016. The rash of disappearances caught the attention of the Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, who opened their own inquiry into the disappearances at the end of 2017. Most of the testimony heard was critical of the police and their lack of progress in their own investigations. The inquiry was forced to come to a halt on January 17, 2018, when police made an arrest in the kidnapping of Pastor Coe. While an arrest in the case seems promising on the surface, in this situation, it actually hampered the investigation. Under Malaysian law, the Human Rights Commission has to cease any inquiry it is making into a case when court proceedings begin against a suspect in that case. The man arrested, 31-year-old Lam Chang Nam, was a part-time Uber driver. In March of 2017, he had been arrested for trying to extort money from Pastor Coe's son in exchange for the pastor's release. Police cleared him of any actual involvement in the kidnapping, saying he had solely been trying to take advantage of the case to make money. The arrest sparked outcry amongst the groups who had been advocating for all of the missing social activists, who suspected that the arrest was made purely to halt the human rights inquiry that was publicly embarrassing the police. The inquiry was reopened in May of 2018, when a panel determined that the subject of the inquiry was not the same as the subject of the court case, after hearing arguments from both the police and lawyers for the Coe family. The inquiry being reopened caused a whistleblower to come forward with new accusations against the police. Police Sergeant Shamzayani Mohammed Daud initially approached Amri Che Mat's wife, Norayati Mod Arifin, to tell her that her husband and Pastor Coe had been abducted as part of a black operation by Malaysia's special branch, with the full knowledge of the Inspector General of Police. The motive for Pastor Coe's abduction was his alleged proselytizing of Muslims, something Pastor Coe's family has always denied he ever engaged in. However, the day before he was due to testify at the inquiry, Dowd filed a police report saying he had never made these statements. The Human Rights Commission's inquiry was finally completed in December 2018. On February 13, 2019, Pastor Coe's wife Susanna appealed to Malaysia's Prime Minister to order a new investigation. Despite the amount of time since her husband was abducted, Susanna still holds out hope that her husband is not dead, but being held somewhere against his will, and will in time be released back to his family. In 2004, Amanda Fleetwood was 20 years old and had dreams of moving to Japan to teach English. To finance the trip there, she took a job as a waitress. Just a few days before she was set to start that job, on July 10th, she and her friend, Johnny Tromp, made a quick stop at the Bizarre Times novelty store in the 8200 block of Richmond Avenue in Houston, Texas, to buy cigarettes. In the store with them was a man hanging around the counter. He struck up a conversation with the two friends and asked them multiple times to give him a ride home. Multiple times, the pair told the stranger no. The man followed Amanda and Johnny out into the parking lot and continued talking to them for about 15 minutes, as all three smoked cigarettes. When he asked again for a ride, Johnny relented, and the three got into Johnny's car. Johnny was driving, Amanda was in the passenger seat, and the stranger sat in the back. He directed Johnny to drive to the Tango Wild South townhome complex, approximately half a mile away. When they arrived at the complex, he asked Johnny to pull into a driveway so he could get out. Before he exited the car, however, he shot Johnny and Amanda, each once in the head. The man then got out of the car, opened the front driver's side door, and began going through Johnny's pockets, taking his wallet. Johnny managed to regain consciousness and threw his car into reverse and sped off. The man shot Johnny twice more in the head as he made his escape. Johnny was still somehow able to drive several miles with his extensive injuries before losing control of the car. Luckily, he did so at a construction site in the 6700 block of West Sam Houston Parkway, where several off-duty police officers were working their second jobs as security guards. They called for help, and Amanda and Johnny were both rushed to Ben Taub Hospital. Johnny lost one of his eyes, but survived the attack, and after a few weeks in the hospital, he was able to go home. Amanda was not so lucky. She died 5 days after being shot on July 15th, 2004. Police had few leads in the case. They were able to lift DNA from a juice box the suspect left in Johnny's car, but found no matches to it. The suspect was captured on surveillance cameras inside and outside of Bizarre Times, Initially, police only released a still image of the suspect from the video. In 2018, with still no arrest made, they released the full video. Amanda's father and stepmother continue their own investigation into the case as well, comparing Amanda's murder to similar crimes in the area, in hopes to finally locate Amanda's killer and have him arrested.